The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Commander Elias Vance, a soldier of the Terran Alliance, lay on the cold metal floor of the Xyrian ship. His hands were bound, and his armor was cracked and dented from the fierce fight. Around him, strange blue lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The air smelled faintly of metal and something sharp like the scent of electricity. Elias did not speak. He did not move. He waited. The door hissed open, and a figure stepped inside. She moved with grace, her steps silent but powerful. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, and her eyes glowed a soft violet. She wore a crown of crystals that caught the light and scattered it like tiny stars. This was Princess Solari, the young ruler of the Xyrian Dominion. She stopped before Elias and looked down at him with a smile that was more like a smirk. "So, this is the famous human soldier," she said, her voice clear and smooth. "The one who thinks he can challenge the might of the Xyrian people." Elias met her gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only steady calm. Solari studied him carefully, noticing the scars on his face and the way his chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Despite the damage to his armor, he seemed unbroken. "You are far from your home," she continued, circling him like a predator studying its prey. "And yet, you fought so hard. Why? What makes humans think they can stand against us?" Elias said nothing. Solari laughed softly. Silence. Typical. Humans always hide behind their noise and weapons. But what happens when those are taken away? When you have nothing but yourself? She paused and looked at the broken armor. "Are you just a machine? Or is there something more inside?" Elias's eyes flickered with a hint of a smile. Solari stepped closer. "I will enjoy breaking you. Maybe then I will understand what makes your kind so dangerous." The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Solari turned on her heel and left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Elias remained still, his mind sharp even in captivity. The next morning, Solari returned, this time with a group of Xyrian guards. They sat around a glowing table, a holographic map of the galaxy floating above it. Planets blinked like stars, and lines of light connected them, showing paths of travel and war. Solari pointed at a small blue planet near the edge of the map. "This is Earth, the home of your people." Elias nodded. "This war started because your people refused to join the Dominion," she said coldly. "You fought for your freedom, but it was foolish. The Xyrian Dominion is stronger. We control more worlds, more resources, more power." Elias's jaw tightened. "Strength is not just power," he said quietly. "It is will. It is courage. And sometimes it is the heart to keep fighting when all seems lost." Solari raised an eyebrow. "Poetry? You speak like a dreamer, soldier." He looked at her steadily. "Maybe, but dreams can become reality." She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Tell me, human, what do you see when you look at me?" Elias considered her question. "A princess. A leader. Someone who carries the future of her people." Solari's eyes softened for a moment. Then the old hardness returned. "And what do you see when you look at yourself?" Elias smiled faintly. "A man who never gives up." Days passed. Solari and Elias spoke often. At first her words were sharp and mocking, but gradually they became more curious. She asked about Earth, its blue oceans, green forests, and diverse people. Elias told stories of human courage, of history filled with struggle and hope. The Xyrian guards whispered among themselves, "Why does the princess waste time with a prisoner?" But Solari ignored them. She was learning something new, something that made her question everything she believed. One evening, Solari stood by the window of the high tower, watching the stars outside. Elias sat nearby, his armor resting in pieces on the floor. "You seem different without it," she said softly. Elias looked down at his bare arms and legs, muscles marked by scars. "The armor protects the body. The spirit is inside." Solari's eyes searched his face. Humans are strange. So fragile, yet so strong. Elias nodded. We survive because we fight, not because we are the strongest. Because we believe in something greater than ourselves. Scifi was silent. For the first time, the proud princess felt the weight of a new question. What if the humans were not the weak creatures she was told they were? What if their strength was something deeper? The next day, Scifi's advisors gathered in the grand hall, their faces stern. The human prisoner is dangerous, the regent said. Do not forget, Your Highness, that he is an enemy. Scifi stood tall. He is not just a soldier. He is a symbol of a world we do not understand. The court murmured in confusion and anger. Keep him under watch, the regent ordered. But know this, no one will change the course of the Dominion because of one human. Scifi met Elias's eyes from across the hall. He nodded slightly. No words were needed. The war had brought them together, an alien princess and a human soldier, each caught in the middle of a galaxy at war. But the story was just beginning. Days passed quietly in the towering crystal palace, but tension hung in the air like thick fog. Princess Scifi's curiosity about the human soldier, Elias Vance, grew stronger each day. Despite her initial contempt, she found herself eager to test his mind as much as his spirit. Today, she declared, standing tall before him, we will play a game of wits. Elias, still bound but calm, raised his eyes to meet hers. What kind of game? Scifi smiled, her eyes gleaming with challenge. A battle of logic and reason. You will answer my questions honestly and swiftly. Fail, and your fate will be sealed. Succeed, and I may begin to see what lies beneath your armor. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the palace's energy. Scifi began with simple questions about history, strategy, and ethics. She expected him to stumble, to reveal human weaknesses. Instead, Elias responded with calm confidence and surprising wisdom. What is more powerful? She asked. A great army or a single determined individual? Elias looked thoughtful for a moment. A great army can win battles, but a determined individual can change the course of history. Scifi raised an eyebrow. You speak as if humans are more than just animals in metal suits. Because we are, Elias replied quietly. We have dreams, beliefs, and a will that no armor can protect or hide. Scifi's smirk faded. And what about your armor? Isn't that what keeps you safe? Remove it and what remains? Elias smiled faintly but said nothing. The princess stood abruptly and walked to the large window, gazing out at the stars. Your silence is frustrating, she admitted. But I sense you are hiding something. Elias remained calm. Maybe. Or maybe I simply wait for the right moment. Scifi turned back to him. Very well, soldier, tell me. Why do humans continue to fight when the odds are against them? Elias met her gaze steadily. Because surrender is not an option. Because hope is stronger than fear. For a moment, Scifi was silent. The idea was foreign to her people, who ruled by power and control. Later that day, the princess summoned her advisors to watch as she continued the game. The room filled with Xirian nobles, their faces cold and judgmental. They believed the human was a fool, easily broken. Scifi began asking Elias questions about loyalty and leadership. The questions grew harder, designed to confuse and trap him. Why do humans follow leaders they cannot always trust? She asked. Elias did not hesitate. Because leaders show a path forward. Because even imperfect hope is better than no hope at all. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some frowned, others looked thoughtful. Scifi pressed on. If your leaders make mistakes, do you still follow? Sometimes, Elias answered honestly. But true leadership earns respect through actions, not fear. Scifi studied him closely. His answers were simple but carried weight. Unlike the Xirian leaders who ruled with absolute control, Elias spoke of respect and trust. Your people are strange, she said softly. We command obedience with power. You inspire it with something else. What is power if it cannot inspire? Elias asked quietly. The princess did not reply. Instead, she walked to a console and called up images of battles where humans had fought against impossible odds. "Look at this," she said, pointing. "Your kind is often outnumbered and outgunned. Yet you fight on." Elias nodded. "Because we believe in something worth protecting. Family, freedom, home." Solari's eyes softened again. "Your armor hides more than your body. It hides your heart." That night, the guards allowed Elias a moment outside his cell. Solari met him in the courtyard, under the pale glow of twin moons. "You surprise me, human," she admitted. "I expected a brute. Instead, I see a man." Elias looked up at the stars. "I am just a man, but men can be more than what they seem." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Remove your armor tomorrow. I want to see who you really are." Elias's eyes met hers, steady and unafraid. "When the time is right." Solari turned away, her thoughts racing. What if the armor was more than just protection? What if it was a symbol of the strength within? The next morning, the palace was buzzing with whispers. The princess had made a rare announcement. Elias would remove his armor in front of the court. The nobles gathered, curiosity mixed with disdain. They expected the human to crumble, to reveal weakness. Elias was brought forward, calm and composed. Slowly, he began to remove his helmet, revealing a face marked by battle scars but bright with determination. The crowd gasped. He was not the monster many had imagined. His eyes held quiet strength, and a depth that no armor could hide. Layer by layer, Elias removed the heavy plates, revealing lean muscles and the marks of hard training. Solari watched in silence, feeling something shift inside her. When the last piece was removed, Elias stood tall and unarmed, vulnerable, yet unbroken. The princess stepped forward. "You are not what I expected, soldier." Elias smiled. "Nor are you, princess." For the first time, Solari felt respect, not for a prisoner, but for a warrior and a man. As the crowd dispersed, Solari remained behind, lost in thought. What is it that makes humans so strong? She wondered aloud. Elias, now free of armor, sat quietly nearby. It is the spirit inside, the will to keep going no matter the cost. Solari nodded slowly. Perhaps there is more to your kind than I ever imagined. The game of power had only just begun, and both knew that the true battle was not on the fields of war, but in the hearts and minds of those who dared to dream of peace. The sunlight filtering through the tall crystal windows created sparkling patterns on the floor of the high chamber. Princess Solari stood silently, watching Elias as he carefully folded his broken armor pieces. The room was quiet, except for the soft rustle of fabric and the faint hum of the palace's energy fields. For days now, Elias had remained without his heavy armor. The court had whispered with surprise and curiosity, and even Solari's own advisors were unsure what to make of this change. But to Solari, it was more than just a display. It was a revelation. "Tell me, Elias," she said softly, stepping closer. "What do you feel now without your armor?" Elias looked up, his eyes steady and calm. "I feel lighter, but also more exposed." Solari nodded thoughtfully. "You are naked in front of many eyes, and yet you do not seem afraid." Elias smiled faintly. "Fear is natural, but courage is choosing to face it anyway." She studied his face, noting the small scars that mapped his skin like silent stories. There was no shame in them, only proof of survival and strength. "Your kind," Solari said quietly, "wears armor not just to protect the body, but to hide something inside. Is that true?" Elias considered the question. "Sometimes, yes. Armor can protect the body from harm, but it can also shield the heart from pain. Taking it off is hard. It leaves you open." Solari stepped back, her mind racing. "And yet, you chose to remove it. Even here in my palace, surrounded by those who do not trust you. Because trust must start somewhere," Elias replied. "I wanted you to see the man, not just the soldier." For the first time, Solari felt a flicker of respect deeper than curiosity. Elias was not just a captive or an enemy. He was a person, with hopes, fears, and unbroken will. That afternoon, the princess invited Elias to walk with her through the palace gardens. The gardens were unlike anything Elias had seen. Tall, glowing plants with colors shifting softly in the light. Strange birds sang songs that echoed in the quiet air. As they walked side by side, Solari spoke of her people, their long history, their desire for peace, and their fear of weakness. "We have lived for centuries in safety," she said. "Our armor is not just metal. It is tradition, strength, pride." Elias listened carefully. Sometimes safety can become a cage, and pride can blind us to the truth. Solari looked at him with surprise. "And what truth do you speak of?" "That strength is not only in armor or power," Elias said gently. "It is in the willingness to change, to admit when we are wrong, to fight not just for ourselves, but for others." The princess was silent, the weight of his words settling around her. Back in the palace, Solari's advisors whispered with concern. "The princess spends too much time with the human," one said. "He is a prisoner. His ideas are dangerous." The EU regent, a stern man with silver hair, warned, "Remember your duty, Solari. The Dominion's future depends on strength and unity. A soldier is a soldier, no matter his words." But Solari's heart was torn. She wanted to honor her people. But she also saw something new in Elias, a different kind of strength that could change everything. One evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Solari found Elias standing alone on the balcony. The stars stretched endlessly above them, cold and distant. "Do you ever fear for your people?" she asked softly. Elias looked out at the stars. "Every day. But fear is a teacher. It pushes us to be better." Solari leaned against the railing. "My people believe strength is the only way, but I wonder if they are right." Elias turned to her. "Strength is important, but it is not enough. Sometimes the strongest thing is to listen, to learn, and to change." She smiled faintly, a mix of hope and sadness. "You have changed me, Elias. More than I expected." He bowed his head slightly. "And you have given me hope." The next day, an urgent message arrived from the palace command. A group of Zyrian warriors was moving closer to the capital, demanding that Elias be returned to captivity, fully armored and restrained. They saw his bare form as a sign of weakness and danger. Solari faced a difficult choice. If she sent Elias back to his cell, their fragile connection would break. If she refused, it could spark a conflict within her own people. With steady resolve, she ordered her guards. "Elias will remain free as long as he honors this place." When Elias heard the order, he nodded. "Thank you, Princess." Solari felt a new strength inside herself, a courage born not from power but from trust. That night, Solari and Elias shared a quiet meal. The palace staff brought dishes from Earth, simple foods Elias missed while Solari tasted them for the first time. "Your people find joy in small things," she observed. Elias smiled warmly. "Sometimes the smallest joys are the greatest treasures." They talked long into the night, their conversation weaving between hopes, fears, and dreams. The walls between their worlds began to crumble. As part 3 closed, the princess and the soldier stood together, not as captor and captive, but as two souls beginning to understand the true meaning of strength. Solari whispered, "You have shown me that beneath the armor, there is a heart that beats with courage, and that heart is stronger than any weapon." Elias smiled. "And I have learned that sometimes the greatest armor is the trust we give each other." Outside, the stars continued to shine, silent witnesses to a friendship that could change the fate of two worlds. The palace halls hummed softly with the movement of servants and advisors, but in the high chambers, a quiet tension filled the air. Princess Solari paced near the grand window, watching the distant stars. The stories Elias had shared of Earth and its people played in her mind like a distant melody, strange, hopeful, and real. The Zirian dominion was a kingdom of stone and light, a civilization built on ancient traditions, strength, and control. Its people were proud, their lives shaped by order and power. But Elias's words spoke of something different: struggle, sacrifice, and a burning hope that refused to die. Scifi turned away from the window and found Elias seated at a low table, quietly sharpening a small blade. He looked up and smiled, a tired but steady warmth in his eyes. "Tell me more about your world, Elias," Scifi said softly. "What is it like to live where people fight so hard to protect their homes?" Elias set down the blade and looked thoughtful. "Earth is a place of great beauty, but also great struggle. People live with many fears: war, hunger, loss. But they also live with hope. Even when everything seems against them, they find a reason to keep going." Scifi nodded slowly. "That is different from us. We have never known hunger or war like that. Our lives are safe, but sometimes I wonder if we have forgotten what it means to truly live." Elias leaned forward. "Strength is not just about power or safety. It's about the fire inside, the courage to face pain, to stand for something greater." Scifi's eyes shone with a new light, a flame of flesh burning bright. He smiled. "Exactly." In the days that followed, Scifi's visits to Elias grew longer. They talked about everything: the stars, the people they loved, the fears they carried. The princess found herself drawn to his stories, each one a thread weaving a new understanding between them. But the court was not pleased. The regent, watching from the shadows, grew impatient. "Your Highness," he said sharply one morning, "the human is a prisoner. Your kindness will be seen as weakness. The dominion must remain strong, not soft." Scifi met his gaze without fear. "Strength can take many forms. We are more than stone and armor." The regent's eyes narrowed. "Do not forget your duty." But Scifi knew her path was changing. Elias had shown her a new way, a path where strength and compassion could walk side by side. One afternoon, as the sun set over the crystal towers, Scifi and Elias walked through the palace gardens. The glowing plants cast soft light around them, and the air was filled with the scent of strange flowers. "I want to show you something," Scifi said, leading him to a quiet courtyard. There, carved into the stone walls, were ancient Zirian symbols and stories, tales of battles, heroes, and victories. "This is our history," Scifi explained. "Our people built this kingdom from stone and light. But sometimes I wonder if we have forgotten the stories of those who struggled beneath the surface." Elias traced a finger over the carvings. "Every kingdom has stories like this. But it's the people, those who fight, love, and dream, who truly build the future." Scifi smiled. "Maybe it is time for new stories to be written." That evening, the palace was filled with whispers. News had spread that the princess spent much time with the human soldier, that she had asked him to remove his armor, and that she listened to his stories. Many nobles were shocked. To them, Elias was an enemy, a symbol of defiance that must be crushed. The regent convened a council meeting. "The princess's actions threaten the unity of the dominion," he warned. "We must act before this foolishness spreads." Scifi entered the hall, her voice clear and strong. "I will not allow fear to rule us." The council erupted in protest, but Scifi stood firm. "If we are to survive, we must learn from those we once called enemies. Strength without understanding is weakness." Her words hung in the air, challenging and brave. Later that night, Scifi sat with Elias in her private chambers. The weight of the day pressed on them both. "Your people must be very brave," she said quietly. Elias nodded. "Bravery comes from believing that a better future is possible." Scifi looked at him with new respect. "You have changed me, Elias. I see now that strength is not just power, it is heart." He reached out and gently took her hand. "And you have shown me that even a kingdom of stone can hold a flame." They sat together in silence, two worlds beginning to find common ground, but peace was fragile. The next morning, an urgent message arrived from the frontier. Zirian forces were preparing to attack a human settlement. The regent had acted without Solari's knowledge, determined to crush any sign of weakness. Solari's heart tightened. The war was far from over, and the future she dreamed of seemed distant. She turned to Elias. "We must find a way to stop this." He nodded. Together. As part 4 closed, the princess and the soldier stood side by side, two souls caught between duty and hope, between a kingdom of stone and a flame of flesh. Their journey was only beginning. The grand hall of the Zirian palace was filled with cold light from the crystal chandeliers. High above, banners of the Dominion hung proudly, but beneath their gleam, the air was thick with tension. Princess Solari stood at the center, her face calm but determined, as the council of nobles gathered before her. The regent's voice was sharp and accusing. "Your Highness, your actions have weakened us. You allow a human prisoner to walk free, to speak freely, and even to influence you. This is not the way of the Dominion." Solari met his gaze without flinching. "I have seen something others have not. Elias is more than a prisoner. He is a symbol of hope, of strength that does not come from power alone." The nobles murmured in disbelief. Some leaned forward, anger flickering in their eyes. "You would risk everything for one human?" one asked. "Yes," Solari replied, "because in him, I see what our people lack. A heart willing to fight, for what is right, not just for power." The regent slammed his fist on the table. "This is rebellion, Your Highness. You endanger the Dominion and your throne." Solari's voice rose, steady and strong. "If standing for peace is rebellion, then so be it." The council erupted in outrage. Guards stepped forward and whispers of mutiny spread. Yet Solari stood firm, her resolve shining brighter than ever. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, Solari found Elias waiting. His eyes held concern but also trust. "They will not accept this easily," he said. "I know," Solari replied, "but I will not turn away from what I believe." Elias nodded. "You are brave, braver than I imagined." Solari smiled softly. "I learned from the best." The following days were filled with unrest. Some nobles called for Elias's return to the deepest cells, while others quietly supported the princess's vision. The palace was divided, and rumors of rebellion spread beyond its walls. One night, as Solari walked through the silent halls, she sensed movement behind her. A group of masked figures emerged from the shadows, assassins sent by those who feared change. Before she could react, Elias appeared, blocking the path with calm strength. "You will not harm her." The assassins hesitated, then retreated into the darkness. Solari's heart pounded. "Thank you, Elias. You saved my life." He nodded. "I will always protect you." News of the attack spread quickly. The princess's guards were doubled, and her council meetings became guarded by loyal soldiers. Yet the danger was far from over. The regent, furious and desperate, called for a vote to remove Solari from power. He claimed she was unfit to rule, blinded by weakness, but Solari's supporters stood beside her. "We will not let fear control us," one noble declared. "We follow the princess because she sees a future worth fighting for." The vote was close, but Solari remained in power, barely. The tension inside the palace mirrored the war outside. Zirian forces moved closer to human worlds, ready to strike without the princess's approval. Solari knew that without peace, more lives would be lost. She turned to Elias. "We must act, together," he agreed. "I will speak to the Terran Alliance. Maybe they will listen." Plans were made for a secret meeting between Solari and the human leaders. It was risky, but necessary, en Noir. The day of the meeting, Solari stood before the fleet's command ship, a mix of nervousness and hope in her heart. Elias stood beside her, armored once more but with his spirit unbroken. The human commanders greeted them with caution but listened carefully as Scifi spoke of peace and understanding. She told them of her people's fears and her own desire to end the war. One commander said, "If your people stand with you, Princess, there is hope." Scifi nodded. "I will do everything to unite us." As the meeting ended, Elias looked at Scifi with pride. "You have the strength to change worlds." Scifi smiled, her eyes bright. "And you have the courage to show me the way." The key path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but together, they held the promise of a new future. The halls of the Xyrian palace buzzed with unrest. Princess Scifi's bold decision to seek peace with the humans was shaking the foundation of the Dominion. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, and the regent's anger burned hotter with every passing day. But Scifi remained steadfast. In a brightly lit chamber lined with crystal walls, Scifi met with Elias and her closest advisors. The holographic map of the galaxy floated above the table, planets and star systems glowing softly. "We have a chance," Scifi said, her voice steady. "The humans want peace, but they need to see we mean it." One advisor frowned. "Your Highness, many fear this is a trick. The Dominion's enemies will use your kindness against us." Scifi shook her head. "Kindness is not weakness, it is strength wrapped in hope." Elias stepped forward. "I have spoken with the Terran leaders. They will consider peace talks, but only if the Dominion shows it can change." The room fell silent. Change was a heavy word in the Dominion, where tradition was law. Later, in the privacy of the gardens, Scifi and Elias walked beneath the glowing plants. The soft light made the night feel alive, full of promise. "Do you believe your people will accept this?" Scifi asked. Elias looked up at the stars. "People want peace, but they also fear change. It takes time and courage to face both." Scifi smiled. "I have found courage I never knew I had." He looked at her with admiration. "You carry the fire within." Back in the palace, the regent gathered his supporters. "The princess's weakness will destroy us," he warned. "We must act before it is too late." Plans were made to challenge Scifi's rule once again. A vote in the High Council was called, and the palace prepared for conflict. Scifi faced the council with calm determination. "The future demands we choose peace over war." The council chamber was tense. Voices rose and fell as nobles argued, fiercely. When the final vote was cast, Scifi held her breath. The results were clear. The princess had won, but barely. The room was divided and many still doubted her. But Scifi did not waver. She knew the hardest battles were not fought with weapons, but with courage and heart. The peace talks began in a neutral space between the two worlds. Scifi and Elias stood side by side, facing human and Xyrian leaders. The air was heavy with tension and hope. Scifi spoke first. "We come not as enemies, but as beings who wish to understand and grow." The human leaders listened carefully, their faces serious, but open. Elias added, "We have seen the cost of war. Let us find a new path." Hours passed with careful words, questions, and moments of silence. Slowly, trust began to build. As the talks continued, Scifi received messages from her people, both support and threats. The struggle for peace was not easy. One evening, as she rested, Elias sat beside her. "Your people need you," he said. Gently, Scifi nodded. "And I need them to understand." He took her hand. "We will face this together." News came that the regent was rallying forces outside the capital. A challenge to Scifi's rule was near. But instead of fear, Scifi felt a quiet fire within. The fire Elias had seen, the fire of hope and change. "I will not let fear win," she said. Elias smiled. "Then we fight with light, not shadow." The story of a young alien princess and a human soldier had moved from taunts and captivity to trust and hope. Now, as their worlds stood on the edge of change, the fire within would guide them toward a future neither could imagine alone. The great hall was filled with light from the crystal chandeliers, but the mood was heavy. Princess Scifi stood at the front, dressed in her royal robes, her eyes steady and bright. Beside her stood Commander Elias Vance, no longer a prisoner, but an ally and friend. The gathering was unlike any before. Leaders from the Dirian Dominion and the Terran Alliance sat side by side. The time for talks was at hand, talks that could end a war that had lasted too long. Scifi took a deep breath. We have come far from where we began. Once we saw each other as enemies, but now we stand together, ready to build a future where our people can live in peace. Elias nodded. I never imagined this moment, the moment when a princess and a soldier could lead not with swords but with hope. The room was silent, the weight of their words settling. Behind the scenes, tensions still simmered. The regent and his followers watched the peace efforts with suspicion. Some plotted to stop the talks, fearing the change they brought. Scifi knew the path ahead was difficult. Peace was not the end of struggle, but the beginning of a new journey. She looked at Elias. We will face those who do not want peace. Elias smiled, and we will face them together. The first agreements were signed, small but meaningful. Trade routes opened between worlds. Cultural exchanges began. Slowly, walls built by fear and war began to crumble. Scifi and Elias often met in private to plan their next steps. They shared stories of their homes, hopes for the future, and fears they kept hidden from others. You have changed more than just my mind, Scifi said one evening. You have changed my heart. Elias took her hand gently. And you have given me something I never expected. A new family, a new home. One day, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Scifi spoke softly. Do you ever miss your armor? Elias smiled. Sometimes. But I know now that true strength comes from within, not from metal or weapons. Scifi nodded. I have learned that too. Their eyes met, and for a moment the past, the taunts, the battles, the doubts seemed very far away. As peace grew stronger, so did the bond between the princess and the soldier. They became symbols of a new era, proof that enemies could become allies, and that strength could come from understanding and trust. The people of both worlds began to hope. But peace required constant care. When a small group tried to sabotage the agreements, Scifi and Elias worked quickly to stop them. Their courage inspired others to stand against violence. Peace is a choice we make every day, Scifi told her people. And I choose it, for all of us. Elias stood beside her. And I choose it with you. Years later, the galaxy was different. The Terran Alliance and the Dirian Dominion shared knowledge, culture, and friendship. Wars were stories from the past, lessons learned. Princess Scifi wore her crown not just as a symbol of power, but as a promise of hope. Commander Elias Vance was no longer just a soldier. He was a leader, a friend, and a symbol of courage. Together, they had changed the course of history. In the final moments of their journey, Scifi turned to Elias and said, You were never what I expected, human, but perhaps you were exactly what we needed. Elias smiled warmly. And you were more than just a princess. You were the fire that showed me the way. Under the bright stars of a peaceful galaxy, they stood side by side, the crown and the soldier, ready to face whatever the future held.